The gravity in the Galactic Academy's main hall felt almost oppressively light to Samira Patel as she made her way through the morning crowd. At 1/3 of Earth's gravity, each step threatened to send her bouncing off the polished crystalline floors like some awkward space ballerina. After 6 months at the Academy, she still hadn't quite mastered the art of walking naturally in low-G environments. Cadet Patel, your velocity exceeds safety parameters by approximately 12.3%, chirped the hall monitor AI, its holographic form materializing beside her with an expression of artificial concern. Samira suppressed a sigh. Noted, monitor. Adjusting stride length now. She deliberately shortened her steps, ignoring the way several Melfian cadets rippled their tentacles in amusement as they glided past. Their homeworld's gravity was even lower than the Academy's, making them appear to float effortlessly through the hall like otherworldly dancers. The monitor AI bobbed in approval before dissipating, leaving Samira to continue her careful trek to advanced xenobiology. She was already running late, having spent extra time this morning adjusting her environmental suit. The standard-issue cadet uniforms weren't designed with Deathworlders in mind, and the reinforced joints had a tendency to stick if not properly maintained. Professor Nxthara was already midway through their lecture when Samira slipped into the classroom. The multi-limbed arachnid professor paused briefly, all 8 eyes focusing on her with what might have been disapproval. It was always hard to read arachnid expressions. Cadet Patel, how fortunate you could join us, Nxthara clicked, mandibles moving in precise patterns. We were just discussing environmental adaptation strategies. Perhaps you'd care to share your perspective on high-gravity survival mechanisms. Samira felt every eye, optical sensor, and sensory organ in the room turn toward her. As the only human currently enrolled in the Academy, she'd grown unfortunately accustomed to being the center of attention. With respect, Professor, I'm not sure my perspective would be relevant. Earth's gravity isn't particularly exceptional by Deathworld standards. A ripple of nervous whispers swept through the classroom. Even after months of coexistence, most of her classmates still couldn't quite wrap their heads around the fact that humans considered a crushing 9.8 meters per second squared to be normal. Fascinating, Nxthara clicked. And yet here you are, functioning in our humble 1/3 gravity environment. Though perhaps functioning is a generous term, given your persistent tardiness. Before Samira could respond, the classroom's holoprojector flickered to life with an urgent message: all cadets report to Assembly Hall Alpha immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, all cadets report to Assembly Hall Alpha. The message cycled 3 times before fading, leaving the classroom in stunned silence. In the Academy's 1,000-year history, there had never been an unscheduled assembly. Well, Nxthara said, their mandibles clicking rapidly, it seems our discussion of environmental adaptation will have to wait. Proceed to the assembly hall in an orderly fashion, and remember your emergency protocols. As her classmates filed out in neat, precise lines, Samira couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The Academy's AI systems were usually chatty to the point of annoyance, but now they were silent. Even the ever-present monitor hadn't appeared to regulate their evacuation speed. In the corridor, she fell into step beside Ren, a centaurian whose crystalline form refracted the overhead lights into dancing patterns. Despite being composed primarily of living crystal, Ren was one of the few cadets who didn't treat Samira like she might accidentally break them. "Any ideas what's going on?" she asked quietly. Ren's surface facets shifted in what Samira had learned was their equivalent of a shrug. "The quantum harmonics are disturbed. Something is interfering with the background resonance of spacetime itself." "That sounds not good," Samira replied, already calculating escape routes and defensive positions, a habit her instructors called typical Deathworlder paranoia, and her fellow humans called basic common sense. The assembly hall was already packed and they arrived, filled with nervous chatter in dozens of different languages. The universal translators were working overtime, creating an odd echo effect as they processed the overlapping conversations. Admiral Zena, the Academy's commander, appeared on the central platform. The normally composed auroran's bioluminescent patterns were pulsing rapidly, a clear sign of distress to anyone familiar with their species. "Cadets, faculty, we face an unprecedented situation," Zena's voice resonated through the hall. "Approximately 20 minutes ago, our long-range sensors detected a quantum anomaly approaching the Academy. We have confirmed that it matches the signature of a Void Harbinger." The hall erupted in panic. Void Harbingers were supposed to be extinct, wiped out in the Great Purge 5,000 years ago. The ancient spacefaring predators were living ships that fed on quantum energy, capable of devouring entire stations, or academies. Silence. Zena's command cut through the chaos. "We have initiated emergency protocols, but the nearest fleet is 3 days away. The Academy's defensive systems are formidable, but they were not designed to repel a Harbinger." Samira felt her pulse quicken as adrenaline began coursing through her system. This was exactly the kind of situation humans had evolved to handle: impossible odds, deadly threats, and the need for quick, creative solutions. "However," Zena continued, "our xenoarchaeology department has discovered something that might give us a chance. In the Level 12 secure archives, we have a preserved piece of ancient human technology, recovered from Earth's pre-contact period. We believe it might be capable of disrupting the Harbinger's quantum field." Samira's eyes widened. Level 12 secure archives. Those were reserved for the most dangerous artifacts in known space. What kind of human technology could possibly? "Cadet Patel," Zena's voice cut through her thoughts. "Report to my office immediately. The rest of you, proceed to your designated emergency shelters. May the first light preserve us all." As Samira made her way to the Admiral's office, her mind raced with possibilities. Whatever this ancient human artifact was, it had better be good. They had less than 3 days to figure out how to use it to stop an extinct space predator from eating their school. Just another day at the Galactic Academy. Admiral Zena's office was a study in controlled chaos. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing the approaching Void Harbinger's position relative to the Academy. Samira tried not to stare at the creature's massive form, a living ship that resembled a cross between a manta ray and a black hole. "Cadet Patel," Zena's bioluminescent patterns pulsed in complex sequences as they spoke, "what do you know about Earth's Cold War period?" Samira blinked, caught off guard by the question. It was a period of political and military tension between major Earth powers, marked by rapid technological advancement and questionable decision-making, Admiral. Questionable indeed. Zena gestured, and a secure containment unit rose from the floor. Inside, suspended in a stasis field, was what appeared to be an old Earth computer system. Its beige plastic casing had yellowed with age, and a faded logo was barely visible on its surface. "This," Zena explained, "is what your people called a Commodore 64. It was recovered from a research facility in something called Nevada shortly after first contact. Our scientists have been unable to determine its true purpose, but it generates quantum interference patterns that we've never seen before." Samira stared at the ancient computer in disbelief. "Admiral, that's just a home computer from the 1980s. They were used for games and basic programming. My grandfather had one in his attic." "Games?" Zena's patterns shifted to show confusion. "Our analysis indicates it contains computational algorithms far beyond anything that should have been possible with the technology of that era. We believe it may have been an experimental weapon disguised as a consumer device." A memory stirred in Samira's mind, her grandfather talking about programming competitions, about games that pushed hardware far beyond its supposed limits. "Admiral, I don't think it was a weapon. I think it was something even more powerful: human ingenuity." Before she could explain further, the Academy's AI spoke, "Alert. Void Harbinger has accelerated. Updated arrival time, 18 hours. Impossible," one of Zena's tendrils curled in agitation. "Nothing can accelerate that quickly in normal space." "Actually," Samira said, "an idea forming, that's exactly what we need. Admiral, I need access to the engineering lab and... She looked at the Commodore 64, someone who knows about quantum harmonics. Zena's patterns showed brief hesitation before they nodded. Take Cadet Ren. Their species has an innate understanding of quantum mechanics. But Cadet Patel, if this fails... It won't, Samira replied with the certainty that had helped her species survive on a death world. Because we're not going to fight the Harbinger, we're going to play with it. The engineering lab was normally off-limits to first-year cadets, but emergency protocols had changed everything. Ren's crystalline form hummed with nervous energy as they helped Samira set up the ancient computer. I still don't understand, they chimed. How can primitive electronic entertainment help us against a void harbinger? Samira carefully connected power adapters, praying the old machine would still work. Ever heard of Space War? It was one of the first computer games ever made. Programmers managed to calculate complex orbital mechanics on computers that shouldn't have been capable of it. They didn't just work within the limitations, they broke them. The Commodore's power light blinked on, its simple blue screen glowing like a beacon of hope. Samira's fingers flew across the keyboard, drawing on everything her grandfather had taught her about machine language programming. The Harbinger navigates by quantum fields, right? It's basically playing a game with spacetime, calculating possible positions and choosing the most efficient path. But what if we could change the rules of that game? Ren's surface began to vibrate at a frequency that made Samira's teeth itch. You want to use game physics to disrupt a void harbinger's navigation systems? That's completely insane. Samira grinned. Welcome to human problem solving. Now, help me calculate these quantum harmonics. We need to make this signal strong enough to reach across space. Hours blurred together as they worked. Other cadets joined them, a Malosian with advanced mathematics skills, a Vex specialist in signal processing, even Professor Nxthara contributed their expertise in biological systems. The ancient computer's case was soon surrounded by a jury-rigged array of quantum amplifiers and crystalline resonators. Think about it, Samira explained to her growing audience as she coded. Early game programmers had to trick electrons into doing impossible things just to make a spaceship move across a screen. They created their own physics engines with barely any resources. If we can amplify that signal. Energy spike. The Academy AI's warning came just as Samira entered the final command. Void Harbinger has entered the outer defense perimeter. Through the lab's windows, they could see it, a massive dark shape that seemed to bend light around it, moving with impossible grace for something its size. The Academy's shields flared as the creature began its attack. Samira took a deep breath and pressed enter. The lab screens filled with simple, blocky sprites moving in precise patterns. But amplified by quantum technology and broadcast across space, those simple calculations began to affect reality itself. The Harbinger's movements became erratic as its navigation systems encountered physics that shouldn't exist, the physics of games programmed by humans who refuse to accept limitations. It's working. Ren's crystalline form vibrated with excitement. The quantum field is destabilizing. The Harbinger writhed in space, its fluid movements becoming jerky and confused as it tried to adapt to contradictory rules of spacetime. Victory seemed within reach. Then everything went wrong. The creature's form began to shift, adapting in ways that should have been impossible. The lab's instruments screamed warnings as reality itself seemed to buckle under the strain of conflicting physics. Oh, Samira said quietly as understanding dawned. It's not just following the rules of the game. It's learning to play. The real challenge was just beginning. The Void Harbinger's adaptation to the game physics created cascading quantum anomalies throughout the Academy. Gravity fluctuated wildly, one moment crushing everyone to the floor, the next sending them floating toward the ceiling. For once, Samira's Deathworlder strength was a liability rather than an advantage. We need to stabilize the field. Professor Nxthara's mandibles clicked rapidly as they clung to a support beam. The Academy's structural integrity cannot withstand these fluctuations. Samira watched the ancient computer's display, mind racing. The Harbinger wasn't just learning the rules, it was exploiting them, finding glitches and shortcuts just like gamers had done for centuries. "It's speedrunning," she whispered in horrified admiration. "What?" Ren asked, their crystalline form resonating dangerously with each gravity wave. "It's a gaming term. Finding ways to break the game to complete it faster. The Harbinger is treating our defense like a puzzle to be solved." Samira's eyes widened. "Which means we need to change the game." She turned to her assembled team. "Quick, what games do you have on your personal devices?" "Any kind of game, doesn't matter what." The other cadets exchanged confused looks before beginning to share their entertainment programs. Malosian puzzle matrices, Vex reaction simulators, even Professor Nxthara reluctantly produced an arachnid meditation app. Perfect, Samira began connecting them to their jury-rigged quantum amplifier. "If it wants to play games, we'll give it games. But not just one, all of them. Let's see how it handles multiple rule sets simultaneously." The lab screens flickered as different game physics began overlapping. The Harbinger's form distorted as it encountered contradictory rules, in one space following the precise logic of a Malosian gravity puzzle, in another dealing with the chaotic patterns of an arachnid thought maze. "It's working," someone shouted. The creature's attacks on the Academy's shields had ceased as it struggled to process the conflicting information. Then Ren's crystalline surface suddenly began to glow with an intense light. The quantum harmonics, they're reaching a resonance point. The games aren't just affecting the Harbinger, they're affecting local spacetime. Warning klaxons blared throughout the Academy. On every screen, reality itself seemed to be fragmenting, different physics engines creating patches of contradictory space. In one corner of the lab, objects fell upward. In another, time appeared to be running backward. Containment fields failing in sectors 3 through 7, the Academy AI announced with artificial calm. Reality breach imminent. Professor Nxthara's mandibles clattered in distress. "We have to shut it down. The cure is becoming worse than the disease." But Samira was staring at the Commodore 64's screen, where a simple pattern of pixels was repeating. "No," she said slowly. "We need to go deeper. The Harbinger is still trying to find optimal solutions, so let's give it a game it can't win." Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she began coding something new. "Every game we've thrown at it has rules, patterns it can learn. But humans." She smiled grimly, "Humans made games that break their own rules." "That's impossible," the Vex specialist protested. "A system cannot operate outside its own parameters." "Tell that to the humans who coded Missigno into Pokemon," Samira muttered, then louder, "In games, like in life, humans love to find impossible things and make them possible. We're going to show the Harbinger what happens when you try to process a paradox." The code she was writing wasn't elegant or efficient. It was a mess of contradictions and impossible conditions, the kind of thing that would make any rational system crash. But the Harbinger wasn't just a system, it was alive. And like any living thing, it could be confused. "Everyone brace yourselves," Samira warned as her finger hovered over the enter key. "This is either going to save us or tear reality apart." "Those options are not mutually exclusive," Ren chimed nervously. Samira pressed enter. The quantum amplifier screamed as it broadcast the paradoxical code across space. The Harbinger's form twisted as it encountered instructions that simultaneously told it to be everywhere and nowhere, to follow rules that contradicted themselves. Reality rippled. The lab's instruments sparked and died. For a moment that felt like eternity, existence itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a sound like the universe hiccuping, the Void Harbinger glitched. Its massive form pixelated, broke apart, and reassembled itself in impossible patterns. It was trying to process the unprocessable, to find logic in human illogic. Look! Ren's crystal surface flashed in excitement. It's retreating. Sure enough, the creature was pulling back, its form still glitching and distorting as it tried to escape the paradoxical physics affecting it. But as it withdrew, Samira noticed something strange about its movement pattern. That's not a retreat, she realized with growing dread. It's a reset. It's going back to its last save point. The Harbinger vanished into quantum space, leaving behind an academy full of confused beings and damaged systems. But Samira knew this wasn't over. How long until it returns? Professor Nxthara asked, their mandibles quivering. Samira looked at the quantum readings, doing quick calculations. Based on its pattern? About 6 hours. And next time? She swallowed hard, next time it's going to come prepared for our tricks. The real question was, what would a Void Harbinger armed with knowledge of human gaming exploits be capable of? They were about to find out. 6 hours wasn't much time to prepare for round 2 with an ancient space predator, especially one that had just gotten a crash course in human gaming culture. The academy buzzed with frantic activity as every species contributed their unique abilities to the defense effort. Samira stood in the command center, watching quantum scanners search for any sign of the Harbinger's return. Around her, the combined knowledge of a dozen alien civilizations worked to fortify their position. The Melosians had reinforced the Academy's shields with crystalline matrices. The Vex had optimized their sensor arrays. Even the normally reclusive arachnids had emerged from their meditation chambers to assist. Energy spike detected in Sector 7, the Academy AI announced. Quantum signature matches Void Harbinger parameters, but something's different. Different was an understatement. When the creature emerged from quantum space, it bore little resemblance to its original form. Its surface flickered with pixelated patterns, and its movements had become unnaturally precise. It had integrated the game physics into its very being. By the first light, Admiral Zena's bioluminescence pulsed with shock. What have we done? The Harbinger's attack pattern had changed completely. Instead of trying to consume the Academy's quantum energy directly, it began executing what looked suspiciously like video game combo moves. Each strike targeted specific weak points, as if it was following a strategy guide. It's not just playing the game anymore, Samira realized. It's using speedrun strategies. Looking for exploits in reality itself. The creature's form clipped through the Academy's outer shields as if they weren't there, using techniques that reminded Samira of classic game boundary breaks. Alarms blared as it began systematically targeting critical systems. This is impossible, Professor Nxthara clicked. It's operating outside normal physics. Our defenses are useless against something that doesn't follow natural laws. But Samira was smiling. That's it. It's not following natural laws because it's following game laws. And in games. She turned to Ren, what happens when you use too many exploits at once? The crystalline being's surface rippled with sudden understanding. System crash. Exactly. Samira rushed to the nearest terminal. We need to encourage it. Feed it more exploits, more glitches, more impossibilities. Push it until it can't handle the contradictions. Admiral Zena's patterns showed confusion. You want to help it break reality further? Trust me, Samira replied, her fingers flying over the controls. Sometimes the only way to win is to lose spectacularly. She began broadcasting every game exploit, glitch, and speedrun technique she could remember. The ancient Commodore 64 hummed as it pumped out paradoxical code. Around them, reality began to fragment as the Harbinger eagerly absorbed the new information. The creature's form grew more unstable with each passing moment. It tried to execute multiple exploits simultaneously, phase shifting while wall clipping while frame skipping. Space itself began to protest as natural laws were increasingly ignored. Quantum coherence failing, the AI warned. Reality fractures detected in multiple sectors. But Samira wasn't done. Ren, remember how your people use crystalline resonance to manipulate quantum states? What happens if we broadcast that through the game physics? Ren's surface pulsed with alarm. The harmonic feedback would be catastrophic. It could shatter the quantum field entirely. Perfect. The Harbinger was directly above them now, its pixelated form stretching across space like a glitched texture. It had mastered every exploit they'd shown it, becoming something that existed between reality and game space. Now! Samira shouted. Ren's crystalline form began to vibrate at precisely the right frequency, channeling it through their jerry-rigged system of games and quantum amplifiers. The signal shot upward, carrying with it thousands of years of accumulated human gaming knowledge, every bug, glitch, and exploit ever discovered. The Harbinger tried to absorb this new information, but it was too much. Like a computer trying to run too many programs at once, its form began to fragment. Reality itself seemed to buffer as the creature attempted to execute impossible commands in real space. Then, with a sound like a million game cartridges being blown clean at once, everything stopped. The Harbinger hung motionless above the Academy, its form frozen in mid-glitch. For a moment, nothing moved. Then cracks began to appear in its surface, not physical cracks, but breaks in the code that now made up its being. It's working, Samira breathed. It's experiencing total system failure. But as the creature began to break apart, she noticed something strange in its disintegrating pattern. Hidden beneath the game physics and quantum mathematics was something else, something that looked almost like. That's impossible, she whispered. Those are human programming signatures. Early quantum computing code. Before she could process this revelation, the Harbinger shattered completely, its fragments dissolving into quantum static. The Academy's systems began to stabilize as reality reasserted itself. They had won. But Samira couldn't shake what she'd seen in those final moments. The Void Harbinger hadn't been some ancient space predator randomly attracted to their quantum emissions. It had been looking for something specific. Something human. And she had a terrible feeling they were about to find out why. In the aftermath of the Harbinger's destruction, the Galactic Academy hummed with theories and speculation. Teams of quantum physicists studied the residual energy patterns while xenoarchaeologists debated the significance of the human code fragments found in the creature's core. Samira sat in Admiral Zena's office, staring at holographic projections of the decoded data. It doesn't make sense, she muttered. This code, it's from Earth's first attempts at quantum computing, decades before official first contact. But how did it end up inside a Void Harbinger? Perhaps, Zena's bioluminescent patterns pulsed thoughtfully, we should ask your grandfather about his Commodore 64. Samira's head snapped up. What? The Admiral's patterns shifted to something almost resembling a human smile. Did you really think we kept a random Earth computer in our highest security vault without knowing its history? Your grandfather, Dr. Rajesh Patel, was part of a classified quantum research project in the 1980s. The pieces began falling into place. The impossible calculations her grandfather's games could perform. The strange modifications to his computer. The stories he told about programming competitions that never seemed to appear in any records. The quantum computing experiments, Samira said slowly, they weren't just experiments, were they? You made contact with Earth back then. Not us, Zena corrected. A different faction of spacefaring beings. They saw humanity's potential and feared it. They provided quantum technology to select human scientists, hoping to guide Earth's development along more, predictable paths. Samira felt her pulse quicken. The Void Harbinger wasn't attacking us. It was trying to find the quantum computer. But why? Because, a new voice said from the doorway, it contained the key to humanity's true potential. Professor Enexthera stepped into the office, their mandibles moving in complex patterns. The faction that contacted Earth called themselves the Architects. They believed they could control humanity's development by introducing quantum computing through games, making humans think they were simply pushing the boundaries of entertainment while actually constraining their technological growth. But it backfired, Samira realized. Instead of limiting us, it just taught us to think in quantum terms while playing games. We turned their constraints into opportunities. Precisely, Zena's patterns brightened. The Architects created the Void Harbingers as cleanup crews, designed to eliminate evidence of their interference. But they never anticipated that humans would turn their own quantum technology against them. The holographic displays shifted, showing new data. The code fragments from the Harbinger weren't just early quantum computing experiments, they were a message, buried in game physics and waiting to be found. Your grandfather and his colleagues discovered the truth, NX clicked. They hid their findings in the most obvious place possible, popular home computers. Every game glitch, every impossible speed run, every physics exploit was actually teaching humans to think in quantum terms. And now, Zena added, thanks to your creative solution, we have proof of the Architects' manipulation. The Galactic Council will have to acknowledge humanity's right to develop quantum technology independently. Samira stared at the ancient computer that had helped save the Academy. So what happens now? Now. Zena's patterns formed complex shapes of anticipation. Now we invite humanity to join the Galactic Academy as full partners, not just students. Your species has already proven they can turn games into weapons, constraints into opportunities, and impossible problems into creative solutions. And the Architects? They'll have to face the consequences of their actions, NX clicked. But more importantly, they'll have to face a humanity that's no longer bound by their artificial constraints. A humanity ready to play the quantum game by its own rules. Samira grinned. Think they're ready for that? My dear, Zena's patterns rippled with amusement. Based on what we've seen, I don't think anyone is ready for what humanity will do next. And that's exactly why we need you. As if to emphasize the point, the quantum readings from the Commodore 64 spiked briefly, its screen displaying a simple message, ready. Player 2 press start. The game was just beginning.